Are things good at your house?
Too much food. I can't even think about anything right now. And my mom and my grandma were like,
You have a
just
massive
take
yard.
everything.
Massive gardens.
This is awesome.
A lot of work.
Like also terrible. I should have brought some of the cookies here.
For how long?
But it was good. My brother was visiting from Portland, so
Is he older?
he's younger than me. Yeah. So he's in college there.
Okay. At
Oh, really?
University of Oregon?
No, he's at Lewis and Clark.
Oh,
A
fun.
small
Poor Bill.
Okay. Oh, because they're that's in because we're
yeah.
Oh, okay, good.
But he lives here basically full time.
Boys?
I feel like Portland's like there are a lot of universities, but it's kind of the kind of city where like you get an apartment and like not be on campus.
okay. See, I was going to say, I said, no, in-state, these are 7 minutes. Oh, what's he majoring? So it's
Sociology and anthropology. Yeah. And he's just abroad in Ecuador, so he wants to do something with South America and all that.
It says something like, oh, see things below.
You play bridge? Oh, you do? Okay. Some bridge groups just get together.
You know, the Brian after.
And so how's Bill going?
Just take Brian and
Just
hit enter and populated a name. It probably just said Brian.
Rodendale.
But you didn't say,
You're going for a month?
this is for me.
You're paying well.
Good evening, thank you.
3 weeks instead of 4. Packing a lot in. Good for you.
I think both of them.
Oh, that one. There's
like
enough.
presentation.
Yes.
The pizza one.
Chad is on ZPA and Mary's.
No Marianne?
Oh, and
Okay, let's get going. Okay, I would like to call to order the City of Monona Plan Commission meeting for Monday, June 27th. Roll call, please.
Chair Bussey.
Here.
Alder Holmquist. Mr. Dorschel. Ms. Fox. Ms. Thomas. Mr. Hamburg.
Here.
Mr. Stein and Mr. Ganser are excused.
And welcome to our newest member, Susan Fox. Thank you for joining us, and I got a great mentor right next to you there. It's even better. Item number 3, approval of the minutes for June 13th, 2016. Is there a motion? Is there a second?
Second.
Edits, revisions, comments? None? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Hi.
Opposed? Minutes are approved. Appearances. We've got a couple. We have first Alder Mary O'Connor regarding single-family residential development standards. Welcome, Alder O'Connor.
Good evening. I'm Mary O'Connor, and I reside at 5103 Winnequa Road. I understand that you'll be reviewing the land use legislation sections of the City Code of Ordinances tonight, and I have some concerns about the single-family residence district section of the code, and this seems like an ideal time to bring them to your attention. The handout contains those sections. I'll be referring to pieces of those sections anyway. Since I was initially elected to the council in 2012, the issues that city residents have contacted me about the most have been concerns about how new homes being built in their neighborhoods do not appear to them to conform to the city code. They have basically 2 areas of concern. First are new homes where tremendous amounts of dirt have been brought in to build up the height of the lot before construction begins. When complete, the home then towers over the adjacent homes, resulting in concerns about it being out of character with the rest of the neighborhood, greatly diminished natural light for the neighboring homes, concerns about runoff, etc. Second are new and some existing homes whose new driveways cover most, if not all, of the area on the street side of the house. As a city committed to sustainability, we are trying to keep stormwater runoff from going into the lake. Situations like these just enhance the amount of runoff. I realize that in such instances, homeowners are charged via their water bills to cover the amount of runoff from their lots, but that doesn't do anything to lessen the total amount of runoff. I've talked to Marty Pilger about a couple of these specific situations, and they do conform to code. But I'm wondering if we can make some changes in the code to prevent things like this from happening in the future. If you take a look at the handout I've included what appears to me and Sonia to be the relevant sections of the code. I asked her to help me find exactly where they were. The sections on the front side basically spell out the ultimate goals of the various sections of this part of the code. They focus on such things as not impairing the use or enjoyment of other property in the neighborhood, ensuring that architectural design is harmonious and compatible with nearby development, not having a substantially adverse effect on the existing neighborhood, which would reduce its use, enjoyment, desirability, or depreciate its property values. I'm wondering if we're actually achieving those goals in some of these situations. There are neighbors in one of these instances in particular who I would not be surprised to hear have problems selling their homes due to the impact of the height of the neighboring home. Section 13-1-61 seems particularly relevant. That states, to the extent reasonably possible, the existing natural character of the site shall be preserved. Bringing in a lot of dirt to build a lot up several feet does not seem to result in preserving the existing natural character of the site. I understand that there are situations where fill is needed before construction, but some of these developments seem to result in lots with heights that are way out of proportion to those around them. It's in the definitions and guidelines section on the back side of the handout where I'm wondering if it might be possible to make some adjustments. In section 13-1-4, we define what is meant by the height of a structure. In section 13-1-80, below that, we specify that the maximum height can be 35 feet. However, we don't make any allowance for building up the lot several feet before measuring begins. Finally, in that same section, we say that maximum lot coverage is 40%. However, that number only deals with structures, not any concrete or other pavement. The way this is currently written, unless I'm missing something, it appears that residents could cover the remainder of their lot with pavement if they chose to. It seems like we could do something to try to control the amount of impermeable surfaces on a residential lot. Could we perhaps require a minimum amount of permeable surface as is done in some other communities? I don't have a lot of specific solutions, just a couple of suggestions, which these were, but these definitions and guidelines in particular seem to be areas where we might want to consider making some changes. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you. Next we have Chad Spade of 5000 Wallace, and I would like to speak for informational purposes only. Welcome, Alder.
Good evening. Alderman Chad Spate, 5000 Wallace. I do not have lengthy comments. I simply want to back up what Alder O'Connor has said, specifically with respect to the height of new structures or altered structures, and with respect to our lack of any zoning requirement for permeable surface. I know the council spends a lot of time talking about stormwater and our desire to be a more sustainable community, but it is in fact true that you can pave your entire lot and there's nothing that prevents it. We don't have those tools. In the city of Madison, on most of the properties where I have remodeled homes, the zoning ordinance requires that 40% of the entire surface area of the property be permeable green space. So such a requirement, while typically met with standard setback compliance, still can at times impede certain development, which would otherwise diminish water quality and make it difficult, or make it rather, the failure to have such a restriction would otherwise allow people to pave over much of their lot, as we can do here in Monona. So I would encourage you to consider something along those lines, and thank you for your time and service.
Thank you, Alder. Any other appearances on an item that's not on the agenda? Seeing none, we'll close the appearance section, move on to unfinished business. 5A, public hearing on zoning permit request for 15,000 square foot building addition for Wiedenbeck Inc. at 2451 Kilgust Road, represented by Dave Hambry. No, it's not going to be Dave. It's going to be Sue.
I'm Jane Wiedenbeck Young, one of the owners of Wiedenbeck Incorporated, and I'm here to ask for your approval to move forward with the addition to our building at 2451 Kilgust Road. Based on the Plan Commission meeting on June 13th and a review by Darren Pope of Verbicher, we have revised and resubmitted our plans and we believe we've addressed all of your concerns. You will notice with that submission that we have agreed to complete both the main addition and the truck garage at the same time, and have submitted revised landscape and signage plans to enhance the view from Southtown Drive. Since submission, we have been re-reviewed by Darren Pope and have made additional changes to our plan that are not reflected in your packets, including adding Rock Creek dams to the north and south ponds to reduce the chances of the 3-inch pipe plugging and to provide additional rate runoff and sediment control. Adding a 5-foot by 5-foot by 12-foot deep depression to the south pond to provide additional sediment trapping and reduce the resuspension of settled materials. Remove the addition of pavement at the southeast corner of the site. And we've revised the utility plan to connect the private hydrant with 6-inch pipe to the existing water lateral. Dave Hamby from Tri-North has created for us a 19-week construction schedule, which needs to start quickly in order to enclose our building before winter weather. So I hope that with our revisions and re-revisions, you'll agree that we've addressed your concerns and will give us the approval to move forward. Moving a couple other items ahead in the agenda, you've also received additional information from us comparing our sign request to that of the approved sign of our neighbor Gordon Flesch. You'll see that our ratios of surface area to sign area are nearly identical, and with that information, we also hope that you will approve our request for an exception to the size limitations stated in the sign code regulations. Thank you very much for your time, and we are available for questions.
You just want to stay there for a bit. Well, anyone else who will close the public hearing section, move on to 5B, consideration of action on the request. Sonia?
This was last reviewed 2 weeks ago at a pre-hearing conference, and the applicant summarized a lot of the major requests for feedback and changes made in the plans. One with the building design, there were some plan commission concerns with phasing of the 2 additions, and those will be done at the same time. They've also added landscaping to break up the metal facade on the west elevation. A lot of comments regarding civil engineering review for site layout and grading, stormwater, and erosion control. And revised plans were submitted by the project engineer Ryan Quam after the last meeting, and our consultant Darren Pope did take a look at them, and it appeared to him that most of the comments had been addressed. He was unable to provide a new review letter prior to the meeting, but we spoke on the phone. And the one thing that he did note, as far as new information, was that the applicants have a new approach to stormwater management, that he hadn't reviewed the new calculations for the dry ponds, and he had some concerns with the dry ponds for sediment control. The project engineer would provide new calculations, and if they were not satisfactory, Darren noted that they may have to go to wet ponds and add some control structures. Ultimately, Darren felt this is something that he could work out together with the project engineer. So in the recommended conditions of approval in the staff report, I've noted those areas where appropriate to submit final plans and then for approval by staff, and a few other conditions relating to the private hydrant.
Thank you. Commission members? Questions, Mr. Umber?
Do you feel comfortable you can work it out with staff? Because if not, this is a place to talk about it or ask questions. So is there an issue between you and the consultant yet that you think you can't work out, or seems like it's...
No, I feel the things I just stated addressed the concerns the recent concerns that Darren brought up, so I'm very comfortable working.
He's talking about TSS removal, I'm sure, so he's talking about it might be a restricted outflow, it might be a wet pond versus a dry pond. And from what Sonia just said, you're
correct.
Good with that.
Well, further discussion, yes, with that has indicated that these changes we're making to the dry ponds would be more aesthetically pleasing, and but yes, we can work it.
Okay. And another question, you said 5 foot by 5 foot by 12 foot deep?
12 inch, did I say foot?
Yeah.
12 inch.
Okay, makes a lot more sense, thank you.
Apologize.
Any other comments or questions, Mr. Umber?
I guess I think you've addressed everything we had last week. I think you did a great job of it, so I think it's a good looking project.
Is there a motion?
Second?
Further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
And that was, I should ask, well, is that approval with or without conditions? With the conditions as outlined by staff. And the seconds agreed that was the intent, right?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. And congratulations.
Thank you.
Thank you. Move on to C, which is consideration of action on wall sign permit requested by Wiedenbeck at 2451 Kilgust Road. Mary Beth, you or just Jane? Do you wanna-
Me again.
Sonia, do you want to, go ahead.
Yeah, there were two, this item was tabled at the last meeting also, and there were two concerns, one with the phasing of the buildings, and that has been addressed because both are being built at the same time. And the second was how the ratio compares to the wall facade at Gordon Flesh, which was approved by the Plan Commission. And the revised information submitted by the signage company shows that they are essentially the same. So the approval is for recommendation as written.
Point of order, do we have to remove this from the table? Or
Move that we remove this from the table.
and second by Kathy? And we vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Is there a motion for approval?
Move approval, conditions that's identified by staff.
Is there a second?
Second.
Further discussion? Going once, going twice. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Congratulations again.
Thank you.
No, thank you.
Good luck.
Unfinished business 5D, Plan Commission review and recommendation to City Council on recodification summary by general code regarding land use legislation sections of the Monona Municipal Code of Ordinances. Sonia?
So again, just for background, the city is working on an entire recodification of the Code of Ordinances, and the company that's helping us with that is General Code. We, here at Plan Commission, reviewed this once in May, and there were just a few sections that the Plan Commission wanted some more information on. One, we didn't really get into zoning fees too much, and Sydney did some research comparing Monona's fees to area communities, including Cottage Grove, Fitchburg, McFarland, Stoughton, Verona. And attached is a summary of the recommendations that we ended up with. The text was a little bit unclear. I put it together quickly at the last moment, so I thought I'd just run down the list there if you have the table in front of you.
Yep.
So starting at the top, the general zoning violation fine was $100, and that has not changed from current. The next one is the variance application fee before Zoning Board of Appeals. It's currently $250, and I've recommended increasing that $100 to account for staff time that goes into scheduling a ZBA meeting. And the $350 is still lower than area communities. Cottage Grove is $350 plus an escrow fee of $250. McFarland is $250 plus any legal costs. Stoughton is $400, and Verona is $300. For the next three categories.
Question,
Yes.
if we have legal costs, those are still billable, correct? You said they're so much 250 plus legal costs. We're not inclusive of legal costs, are we?
We don't include that in the
We don't
350.
charge them legal fees. And residential, do we, for zoning board of appeals?
I haven't had a mechanism to apply
Okay.
that. I think I rarely use the legal fees. I think if we wanted to look into that, though, we could. Should I continue?
Yep.
The next three categories, new commercial construction, commercial addition alteration, commercial accessory building. I kept those the same at 125, 85, and 50. Other communities use, they're either somewhat comparable or they use a different fee structure where they have a base fee plus a price per square foot. That I did not recommend anything along those lines unless we wanted to look into doing something a little bit more complicated that would address differences in something like approving new construction for Fairway Glen, a much larger building compared to a smaller new construction project or change of use. I think also for Monona, we want to be somewhat business friendly with the fact that redevelopment is more difficult than development in other communities, and I'm fine with these fees as we have them. Under single family and two family, I've kept those the same for $95, $75, $50. The change in use, it was listed as $50, and this one confused me a little bit. I initially recommended increasing that to what the fee would be if they were applying for a conditional use at ZBA, which would be $350. And then I was reviewing the code just before the meeting and found that most of these would go to Plan Commission instead, so I would recommend changing that to 125, which would be a new use for commercial. Occupancy permit, $50. Sign permit fee, I increased that from a base of $25 plus $1 per square foot. So if someone submits a sign permit application and the sign is 25 square feet, they're going to pay $25. And I increased that to $50 just to be more consistent with other communities. 25 is pretty nominal, so I felt that was appropriate. Sign permit violations are the same at first violation of $50 and subsequent violations $100. And then the next category, we rarely use certified survey maps, preliminary plats, and final plats. And they were previously at $125 base fee plus $25 a lot. And I increased that to be more consistent, but yet cheaper than other communities at $200 with their respective lot fees. The next two categories are reapplication fees of only $25 and $10. And I just recommended removing those completely because we rarely use them and they're such small fees anyway. And then added a new category for zoning verification letters. When properties go through refinancing, they often have code companies call and request a letter that outlines what the current zoning is and if there are any outstanding conditions, if they have a valid occupancy permit. And they always ask what the fee is, and I always reply there is none, but it takes some staff time, and so I've recommended $30. Fitchburg is the only other community that we surveyed that has $28 fee.
Mhm. Thank you.
Kathy has a question.
Kathy?
I just have a question, and I've always wondered about this, and I'm sure it's reasonable. If I want to buy a single car garage, and I want to put in a double car garage, and I need a 1-foot variance, I have to spend $250 to do that. It is more than, I don't know anything else that costs $250. I mean, you could violate your permit and it costs you $50. But you want to go 1 foot over and it costs you $250. What's the rationale for that being so much higher than all of our other fees?
I think the variance fee serves as a little bit of a deterrent because the applicant is asking to break the rules that every other homeowner is required to meet. And when they go through a variance process, there are strict standards that show they have to prove that there's a hardship and that there are special circumstances that they should get special permission.
And when we talk about being welcoming to the business community, I look at our community and we talk about being family friendly, and we have a lot of single car garages in this house. And when I cheered, and Jim, you know this, when you cheer the ZBA and people come in and they can't park their car in a garage and they want to add it, it seems to me giving them the 1 foot variance is being family friendly, and yet we just do $250, which sometimes can be a hardship for some people, particularly if they don't get it. So it just doesn't make sense to me.
Well, every request at ZBA has to be treated individually, and sometimes even a 1 foot variance can, I mean, we just had some comments tonight about height and vision and those sorts of things. So, there's staff time involved in a lot of our, I look at, I don't know, do you have a recommendation?
I don't. I just wondered why it is so, if you look at it in comparison to all of the other fees, it's twice what everything else is.
What are other communities?
Comments.
No, but Sony, what did we find out, or did Sydney find out about?
Cottage Grove is $350 plus the escrow fee of $250. Fitchburg is $560.
Mm-hmm.
McFarland is $250 plus legal costs. Stoughton $400, Verona $300, and that's all we have.
Yeah, and I know everybody's that way. It just, when we say we have a disadvantage because you can't go out and buy a piece of land and build a house with a 2-car garage, on it, and so we have limitations in our space, and I know it takes up, it creates more impervious, you know, but space that, but, and I just wanted to say it because it has always troubled me that we do that, and apparently everybody else does too, but doesn't seem right.
So was there anything else you wanted to walk us through?
Sure, so that was.
Could I comment on that?
You bet.
I think Kathy brings up a good point here, because we do talk about trying to attract families to Monona, and we have a much higher fee for a homeowner to get a variance than we do for any commercial project that comes in, and we spend a lot of time and a lot of staff time on commercial projects, and we're much higher for the homeowner. And I think that's a valid point regardless of what the other communities do. You know, who do we want to be?
Again, is there a recommendation?
Well, certainly not to raise it.
Okay.
And there might be another reason. It might be, and the reason might be to discourage people from asking for a variance, see if they can find something else before they ask for a variance. That might be the reason behind it, but it's certainly not because there's more staff time, because I'll guarantee you spend more staff time on a lot of these commercial projects than you do on a zoning variance. So it might just be all a tool to discourage people, and if that's what it is, then we should just acknowledge it and move forward with it. We've talked here a lot about our zoning ordinance, and again, it flies in the face of what you're speaking to tonight, and I totally get what you're talking about, but we have a lot of homes on lots that there's no room to add on. There's no room to have that extra bedroom so we can have our families, or that extra garage stall if that's what they want. We talk about all the time. What can we do to soften those requirements so that they can come in here and they can put that addition on? We can get more families back into Monona. That means more impervious, obviously, and I don't know the answer to the question. I think it's a great question. I just don't know the answer. But that's the person we'll hurt if we adopt a minimum pervious area on lots. Then we'll, maybe not. We just have to get inventory and see what we have. We have a lot of small lots with homes that are just hard to add on to, and maybe it's just the setbacks that we have to worry about. But again, going to the ZBA for that setback is an issue. And you deal with it all the time, we deal with it all the time. A lot of people are really nervous, they're scared of coming to a body like this. And then you have a big fee and tell them they have to do all this, like, oh, I'm not gonna do it. And do we want to discourage that?
Because they have to pay it whether they lose or not.
Yeah.
Other comments from other commission members? Thoughts? Brian?
When I think of the fees around this, I see it as being purely connected to the costs that go into it, and not as a tool for deterrent, although I think it could be used that way. I look at this much like I look at when we look at public safety, when we look at medicine on the ambulance. I don't want the cost of certain goods on there to be overly inflated to discourage use. I want them to be on there and recoup the cost of them. So much like the cost that goes into all of these aspects, I would want the cost to be equivalent to what it is that it costs to do that work. I know we're not going to be able to have, a peer, it takes 2 hours to do this packet and 2 hours to do that, but some reasonable kind of fee that recoups the cost of staff time.
Sue?
So were you basing your recommendation to raise it to $350 or on what the other communities charge, or on your calculation of the time spent by the city?
It was a little bit of both. One, for the staff time, like Alder Holmquist mentioned, is I don't know exactly how many hours it took me to prepare the Wiedenbeck report versus to prepare for a ZBA meeting. They perhaps might be comparable, but it is also, there are higher standards that I'm required to follow for ZBA for Class 1 notifications in the newspaper, and I often have to get applicants ready weeks in advance of the meeting and then coordinate all of the ZBA members to get together for a meeting. So I think just the more difficult process of staff time is what I was accounting for, and also to be more in comparison with other communities. It does not matter to me whether it's $250 or $350 at the end of the day. That would be your call. I do think that it's appropriate to have a higher fee for a residential variance versus a commercial zoning permit, because they are asking to have a special rule for a variance whereas someone that's coming in for a commercial permit has the same odds of getting that permit as everyone else would. That makes sense.
Well, I don't think 250 is excessive. And actually, I'm not sure that I think 350 would be excessive, particularly when you start talking about the cost of construction and doing anything nowadays. But I wouldn't be adverse to leaving it at 250.
Yeah. Well, why don't we continue with the process, and then when it comes time to make a recommendation, we can, if somebody wants to throw a number out there or not, we'll do it at that time. Go ahead, man.
The next ones provided a little bit of detail. Some of you will want less detail, some of you will want more, but for the first one was clarification on something that the general code company pointed out, a sentence that was missing a word, and we spent a little bit of time struggling with this, I think, at the May meeting. I could not figure out which word was missing, but I went back to the code and found that in the original text there was actually a reference that at the end of the paragraph that said refer back to Article G, which is a section on non-conforming uses. So rather than trying to repeat that section and figure out what the word was that was missing, I just recommended eliminating that paragraph that I have circled in the text there after non-conforming uses and just simply referencing Article G. So my
Sorry?
only comments.
I'm sorry, you're on page 391?
Yes.
Right, so it'd be the cloud that you're, okay.
So-
John?
So you're talking about the one where you have the bold, on the top of page 2 where you have the bold sentence, and you have a bold sentence, but you're not recommending that, you're recommending is to eliminate everything.
Right, the bold is from general code pointing out that that's the sentence that doesn't make sense.
Jim?
Yep, I'm sorry, Sue.
Well, I think that might be a good idea. It occurred to me when I read it that it might be the wrong word. It's
Yeah.
the word missing, that if you change the word whenever to whether,
Mhm.
so it reads whether a non-conforming use or a conforming use such use shall not occur. Then it makes sense. So I just thought maybe it's a typo. But your recommendation to just eliminate the sentence might also make sense as well. So.
Thank you.
Moving on then to the next section was land disturbance, and Plan Commission just wanted a little bit more context here, so I provided a copy of that section of the code. It's nearing the end of the stapled packet, labeled at the top, number 2, land disturbance. And that section is 13-1-66 in the current code. And these are general design principles, which is under the site performance sections of the zoning code. And these are very general design principles. Applicants need to meet numbers 1 through 6 there. And the recommendation at the last meeting was to add a sentence, which back on page 2 of the memo is underlined. And it says, in addition to the regulations and requirements provided in the erosion and stormwater control ordinance. So they have to meet the requirements of our ordinance that is already in place, in addition to numbers 1 through 6.
Thank you.
All right, the next one is...
Any comments or concerns on that? Ready? Okay, thanks.
The next one was a lot of fun. Earth station dish antennas, and it took me for a while to figure this out with Sydney's help, that these are not just dish TV satellites. They're actually those old, larger, out of the 80s structures. And the Wikipedia definition is pretty absurd. It's a ground station or Earth terminal that's a terrestrial radio station designed for extraplanetary telecommunication with spacecraft. And it goes on. So Sydney reviewed all of the other Wisconsin communities that are on the general code website, and there were 108. And only 38% of those 108 communities had a diameter restriction. The Plan Commission's question was, is a 9-foot diameter appropriate or not? And Sydney found that the average diameter was 11 feet. So I just recommended leaving it at 9 feet.
Stromberg.
You really want someone, your next door neighbor, to put a 9-foot dish on the side of their house by you? Come on, do we really need to be allowing the, all we're saying is that we'll regulate them, or we can have regulation. What the state code says is that you can't regulate them under 2 feet. So we're saying, okay, we'll go at 9 feet, but why? Why do we want to let somebody put a commercial dish on the side of their house in a residential area? Is that something we should just leave unregulated? That's my question. I don't think that should be unregulated.
Other comments?
Are you suggesting we disallow them?
I don't know the right answer, but isn't that an awful industrial, commercial type of look to have in a single-family residential
I'm not
neighborhood?
disagreeing.
I don't know the purpose. I have a tenant that we have to take out their dish. What do we do with your dish? He said, haul to landfill. We have no use for them anymore. They're valueless. So where is the demand for putting 9-foot dishes on the side of homes?
We had a neighbor that wanted to get an international station. This was 80s. You know, technology has brought things down.
Yeah.
It's no longer necessary to have that kind of a device to get international stations. Sue?
Well, it would seem we could, the comment here was that the attorney notes that really very few people have these except hobbyists and people who just have them left over from the 80s who maybe are still using them. So if we decide to not allow them, we could grandfather in ones that are existing. And then I just had a question about in the ordinance itself, it refers to 3 meters. Is that the reference?
Yeah.
If we're going to change it, it seems like it should all be in feet because it talks about the height being 14 feet and it says the diameter of 3 meters.
That is, yep, that's part of the recommendation.
That's kind of picky, but if we're going to get rid of it entirely,
For Brian?
So if we eliminate that, if the state says we only can regulate anything beyond 2 feet, or we can't go anything below 2 feet,
Right.
If it is under 2 feet in diameter, we cannot regulate it.
so we can just eliminate it from our code and stick with the state. But Kathy's got it.
Kathy?
I just say we eliminate them, and if they want it, they can ask for it, go to the zoning board of appeals and ask.
$250.
I think the technology has really changed. I mean, the 2 feet discs now are essentially equivalent to what a lot of those bigger discs were 10 years ago. And I don't see the need for the bigger dishes either. I think that we should permit, if somebody wants to come in for a special reason, then they can look at the facts and circumstances. So otherwise, I would say that we should permit the 2-foot dishes, and that should be adequate for a residential use.
I see heads shaking. Okay. Anything grandfathered in? Go ahead, Sue. Yeah. That's what, right?
Right.
Okay. We'll let Sonia catch up on her note taking here.
The last section was, again, some just weirdly transcribed text and line breaks that made this section confusing. And this is in Appendix B of the zoning code under the Monona Drive Access Management Guidelines. So this is the last page on the stapled packet on the back. And I think I didn't completely resolve this myself, but I think the first change makes sense. Where it says driveway median, it should just say driveway median on the left column all on its own. So driveway median, colon, and then it's indented and it should say recommended at all 3-lane driveways with accident pattern of head-on collisions and or volume exceeding 100 vehicles per day. So I think that one makes sense. The next two, I think there should be 3 categories there. Number 2 would be 2-way driveways. 2 one-way driveways, colon, and then 3 would be in lieu of 2 two-way driveways. But I did not pour a lot of time into this one.
I agree. I think it was clearly a formatting issue when the thing was printed up. I actually sat on this committee and when it was all put together, and definitely on the first one, you're right. The 2 one-way driveways, individual driveway volumes should exceed 300 vehicles per day, and highway frontage width, something got left out, because I have no idea what that alludes to, because we don't base our spacing on the frontage width. And if it had to be the frontage width, that would mean you couldn't have 2 driveways, or you're talking about 2 driveways. So it makes absolutely no sense. And I would suggest we have individual driveway volumes should exceed 300 vehicles per day, or actually, quite honestly, it should go to Public Works and see what they have for a recommendation. I think if we're going to change it, I think it should go through Public Works. And the
Two-way driveways would say driveway volumes exceeding 300. Yeah, how we,
and that would be like a McDonald's drive-through. That's one-way driveways. They have 2 one-way driveways, one for only in and one for only out. And you're saying this is a high traffic generator, but I don't even recall what triggers we used for this way back then. It was a study. Do you have it? It had to be 20 years ago we did this. This was when Monona Drive was the Wild West, literally. We had a driveway every 10, 15 feet, another driveway started. It was literally the Wild West, and we were trying to just calm it down a little bit, make driveway cuts a little tougher to get, and have them make some sense. But without going back to the original meeting notes, I'm at a loss for a couple of these, what they even are supposed to be trying to mean. In lieu of 2-way driveway, satisfied driveway spacing guidelines. Well, we have to satisfy driveway spacing guidelines all the time.
Don't we have traffic engineers that the city has that could tell us what this should be, or what other cities have?
Kathy asked, do we have traffic engineers? I think beyond that, we should get an updated recommendation for current standards and what we should be looking at for traffic, for vehicles per day, for et cetera, before we require a median or something like that. It's rare, but once in a while we need it. But there's got to be some general guidelines that are way updated from this.
from Darren or something?
Darren or
Public Works, talk to
Public Works.
Stefan.
Yeah.
Because we have traffic engineers who do things for Public Works. And it seems to me I can
Okay.
see the top of the head of the chair of the Public Works Committee.
It's nodding.
the whole head's not just the top.
Yeah.
I could only see the top.
And are we still talking about this item?
Yeah.
Because the next part doesn't make any sense. That anytime a parcel of land is cleared of existing surface improvements, the driveway serving that parcel should be cleared. That's fine. But then it says, or driveway operation is also directly impacted by internal parking lot circulation patterns. So if there's any impact to circulation patterns, they need to clear the site of any driveways? It doesn't make any sense. I understand anytime a parcel of land is cleared of existing surface improvements, the driveway serving that parcel should be cleared. That makes total sense. But what follows it is gibberish.
Again, back to Public Works to have them craft something for us.
Absolutely.
Any other comments on this? Anything else on yours? Comments on our presentation tonight? From our handouts?
Presentation. Oh, you mean the appearances?
Yeah.
I think it's a complicated issue. I think I'm aware of the same instances where these behemoths have been built and they've pulled the grade up, and it's been, I think it's been really troubling for the homes on either side. Yet we sit here and we talk about we want to encourage people to be able to add on to their homes. So it's going to be really hard to craft something like that can't happen, yet we don't inhibit people from being able to add that second or third bedroom on or add on to their garage. And it's a slippery slope if we start telling people what grade they have to maintain, and you can't change the grade on a piece of property. That's a tough one. I don't have the answer. I've seen it. It's been horrible in some applications. I just don't know how to fix it.
What about the other issue regarding impervious surface?
A lot of communities are regulating that. Again, it depends on the lot. We have a lot of substandard lots. And again, if we want to encourage people to, we have a lot of small homes on these substandard lots. And if we want to encourage people to build a home they can raise a family on, we don't want to discourage that. Do we want somebody to pave their whole backyard? No.
So when you're talking about the surface, there's a difference between if you have a small lot putting a house on versus putting the whole front yard in asphalt and in concrete or impervious surface.
Well, I mean, look at the homes on, I'm sorry, Sue?
I think it's worth thinking about, because I think, sure you don't want to discourage people, but at least one of the homes I'm aware of where the lot was built up, there was a basement there, there was not leakage. There could have been a new house constructed without building up that land. And so it seems to me that maybe there'd be a way to craft some kind of language that would be dependent upon whether there was a reason, and still limiting the amount, because there are a couple of them where really the grade is so high that it does make them tower over. And also just the height of the house. When you look at some of that wording, it does talk about keeping the character, and what I'm saying is not keeping the character of the neighborhood at all. And that's a slippery slope, and you have to be very careful. But it just seems to me it would be worth looking at the grading issue, and then also the even with the impervious surfaces, maybe if it's a substandard lot, there would be an exception. I mean, I'm just thinking out loud, but there might be a way to look into that and think about it more to see if there would be a way to do something.
Kathy?
See, this is what I think the ZBA is about. I think that under ordinary circumstances, I don't want somebody to build a lot, 3 feet up or whatever they did with that house on Winnequa. But there may be circumstances under which someone might want to move part of it up, and that's what you go to the ZBA for, I think. I mean, that's what you go and ask for the exception. But there is a difference between the exception and the rule. And if you allow it, anybody can do it. If you say you cannot allow it without getting a variance.
But it wasn't the problem, they may have been, they may have been within this 35-foot rule, but the fact that they raised the level of the topography created a problem, so they never had to go to ZBA. There wasn't a variance needed for the height of the building and the height of the structure.
But that's why if you were going to raise it up 3 feet, bring in enough dirt to raise your lot up and have it 3 feet higher than the rest of your property, that's the problem, isn't it? And I'm saying don't let them do that. Now,
After Kathy's done. Go ahead.
So I think the issue, or one way to think about it, could be proportionality. And I think the home that we're talking about, or one of the few homes, was a significant change. This wasn't a minor change of a few feet to help with drainage. It was a substantial change to get elevation for the construction in view. I think there's a way, as Susan's talking about that we can craft some language that talks about in a grade differential, a substantial percentage change in height from the curb. I mean, there's a way to word this that minor changes are within the standard construction, but anything beyond that would have to be variance. The impervious, I could see it being a similar standpoint, where any substandard lot would have some type of proportionality that could be applied, but then the standard lots could be held to a more common standard. A possibility.
I look at the homes on Femrite. I mean, they're, and that in the new urbanist, that's what you want to do in a new urbanist type of community.
Absolutely, and I wouldn't say that we would necessarily want to restrict that. So you have multiple units on, they would be considered a substandard lot. How many units? Is it 6 or 8?
6.
6 on 2 lots?
Well, they each have an individual lot. It originally was one home lot, the Femrite home. It was subdivided into 6 lots for 6 homes, but they're small.
Sonia?
I think in that instance too, this was before me, but I think it was rezoned out of single family and it went through a plan development process. So if any other single family lot was rezoned out of the single family, then those same single family standards would no longer apply and it would be case by case anyway.
Brian?
and it was before my time, so hopefully some other folks know. When that was being discussed, was there a discussion regarding stormwater issues in that development process?
Yes,
And how that was going to be managed?
yes. There's rain gardens in there, though. Chris? Okay, devil's advocate. I've got a lot, and it's got a basement that's getting water in, so I want to raise it up a little bit. It's an old home, so it's got a 6.5, 7-foot height in that basement. I want an 8.5-foot height so I can actually use it. Now I've already raised that site up 2-3 feet. Boom, right there. Is that unreasonable? You know, the one we're talking about, it's probably wasn't a lot more than that, 3. I mean, you got to be careful. You tell someone, you stay down the groundwater and put in sump pumps and just pump for the next 40 years or 50 years. I mean, that's not a reasonable expectation either. And as far as pervious, it's just a hard thing to do. As far as pervious goes, we're trying to conserve land. We're trying to get people to build, and use the land better. And if we're trying to use it better, that doesn't mean not building on it. So it's a hard. We have two different types of conservation battling each other on that.
Can I ask a question?
Oh, Chair.
Sure.
Right now, does the ordinance say the structure can't take up more than 40% of the property? So I don't see the concrete, that isn't included in that 40%.
Mary, can I ask, just because they do record this, could you come up and, yeah,
Sorry.
sorry.
You're missing out on your celebrity time.
You're being streamed on YouTube all over the world.
Yes, we're being,
My question is, right now, isn't the ordinance set so that you can't have more than 40%? The structure can't take up more than 40%. So even if you were going to put on an addition, I assume it still has to be within that 40%, or else it needs a variance. Because I'm not talking about a building, I'm talking about concrete, which is not included in the 40%.
Right,
So
what-
I don't know, right, so I don't know if that,
is it?
if that affects this. You see my question, what I'm not sure
If it were
about?
concrete, but the water was retained on the site and handled on the site, the rain garden, is that an issue?
That would be a permeable surface then, right?
Well, I mean, if the water,
different
if the
things.
water that fell on that site was retained on the site, and not that I'm in favor of it, but just devil's advocate, concrete was greater than one would normally like to see, is that an issue? Mr. Humbert?
What most communities do is they'll require permeable pavement in that scenario, either permeable concrete or permeable pavers. There's some way that is actually still infiltrating. I know Madison is one of them. So they will have maximum impervious areas, and if you want to go beyond that, and the new lakeshore zoning really caused a lot of it, then you have to, a lot of them take out existing driveways, existing pavements, so that they can put that additional impermeable on and then compensate for it that way. I mean, it's doable.
Yeah.
It's just, it takes a lot of thought on how we're going to do it and who we affect when we do it.
True.
We always have the side effects for the people we didn't expect. And my wet basement, to me, is a good example of that. And in a low basement, if someone's going to
True,
rebuild
but
it.
then they could go to, you get a
want somebody to
variance?
Go to CBA to be able to get out of their water when they build a home.
Well, or could you say anything more than raising it 2 feet, or, I don't know.
Yeah, there's some
You
number
know,
out there.
If there's some number that you can,
Sue?
Well, that was going to be my point. I think you could, when that really is the situation, then they could go to ZBA and bring, because clearly, again, as to your construction costs, if they're doing that kind of construction, they're putting a lot of money into it, would be worth it to them to go to request a variance, and that would be some of the evidence they'd use to justify it. I mean, I'm aware of one where that was done, where there were drain tiles in there, and there were 2 sump pumps, and it was still, and it was a lower ceiling in the basement, but it was still raised quite a bit. And then it's a question of how much do you really need to raise it to accomplish what you're talking about. It just seems like it's something that's worth thinking about, because there might be people upset about it.
Mr. Humbert?
Maybe we can't do anything, but.
Oh, I'm sorry, Kathy.
One of the places I think where they did a lot of raising, and I cut my hand, is down on Belle Isle.
Yes.
Because there were houses on the corner, and whenever they put something new up down there, they are, and good for them, raising it up. So, what works?
No matter how much.
Well, it's 3 feet sometimes.
Yeah.
And it needs to be, otherwise they're flooded. So, as Chris said, what works what works for one person's friend is another person's enemy. And I don't know what the answer is to how you craft this stuff. I suppose if you could go to and ask for a variance, because nobody's going to argue with somebody about Belle Isle about the flooding. I don't know.
Mr. Emmer?
I think they're all good points, so we have to figure something out, but I've been to ZBA, and it's a tough date. It's a tough date. You have to prove a hardship, period. So is me having I'm tall, basement that I can actually finish and be tall enough for me, is that a hardship, or should I just suck it up and have a shorter basement? You know what I'm saying? I've been there, and they have a burden of proof there that's substantially more than we have here at Plan Commission. And we can look at something, use common sense and say, yeah, this makes sense, let's do it. They have you've probably served on ZBA. It's a much stronger burden of proof. So we can't take that lightly and say, oh, just go to ZBA. It's a tough date. Sonia?
Yeah.
You staff it.
Yes.
Could you say something about where you start measuring from?
Oh, that part's easy.
Right, but
That
I mean,
part's all easy. It's just figuring out what is the scenario that works.
right, but
And
but I mean, if you add 10 feet to the height of your lot,
absolutely, and people have done
And
that
there's been
to
some of
get
that.
around our code and build something that's outrageous
Right.
for a lot and out of character. And
I just hope there's some way that can
Well,
be.
I think
Is there a way, I don't know that we're going to be able to do it tonight, because it is a complicated issue,
Yeah.
but what should the homework be for this issue?
what would, I'm sorry?
The homework be for this issue? I mean, if we're going to, because it is complicated. Do we want to have further discussions? Do we want to have Public Works, somebody else come in and assist us on this?
What have other communities done?
So,
Yeah.
I'm not aware of one where it tells you can't raise the grade a reasonable amount. I think the question is, we have it in our ordinances, what's reasonable, and what do
Right.
we have to enforce right now? Is it enforceable the way it's written? Because it's in there not to change it, and some of these have clearly changed the character.
Does it actually say somewhere that you can't change it?
Well, the stuff you brought us right now
But I didn't
alludes to that, but it's not iterative. It doesn't tell you the numbers. It
Right.
just tells you in general. So who's going to make that call? Certainly Marty can't make that call. Who makes that call that this is above and beyond when you look at a set of plans? Is there a review authority?
Well, the problem obviously is that the existing ordinances have not been interpreted, even though I would have said that a couple of these structures clearly substantially diminish the value of the property on both sides of it, and the property that shouldn't have been allowed. It obviously wasn't done because there wasn't any specific ordinance.
Agree.
And it seems to me, I think too, that we ought to be able to fashion something that gets at these egregious cases without having to deal with all of the other stuff.
do we invite building inspection to attend a meeting with us to discuss this?
Does anyone does anyone ask a lawyer if he has any idea how we can make this more enforceable?
I think we just haven't gotten to that point yet, and I think it would make sense for me to start by reviewing some other communities from the whole gamut, something as easy as just what their definition of height is, to do they have totally different policies, and then present you with some information, and then we can go back to Bill Cole if we need to.
Okay?
Question.
Yes, sir.
Is there any mechanism where we could adopt this and there could be a body that reviews that's not quite the level of review as ZBA? Is there any way that could be adopted? You say you get to this point, there could be, but not necessarily Plan Commission, but a committee like that can look at it and just use common sense and say this makes sense, it doesn't. The problem is we've got a hired staff that he's just trying to look at the letter of the law, and he doesn't have the ability to really sit there and interpret. Is there any committee short of ZBA that could look at that? If he has a question, say, hey, I want this to go there, to see if it meets ordinance. Where there'd be more flexibility than perhaps a ZBA might have. I think we'd all agree, a few of these houses, none of us would have looked at and said, nah, this is, we just said it's
And
baloney.
I agree that it is probably not appropriate just to send everything to ZBA.
Right.
That's not their job, but there might be an opportunity Typically, from what I've seen, the Plan Commission or the ZBA is interpreting the code,
Okay.
but the Plan Commission could have a subcommittee, like an architectural design review committee for residential or an advisory environmental committee.
We have a committee that public safety is responsible for building codes.
There you go.
This is not a building code.
Well, but it's, well, one would think it's close enough. I mean, if there's, rather than to create another city committee.
How does public safety?
Yeah, so I think the reason building inspection currently is underneath public safety is the inspection around safety compliance issue, and I think what we're getting at here is closer to this group.
Yeah.
It's, you know, the building inspection kind of falls on two sides of the roof, right? I mean, they fall on the side of ensuring safety, but then they're also being asked to interpret information around performance standards as it relates to zoning, which seems to be more here or a subsection of this. But I too don't want to just add more groups to add more groups.
So is it, am I hearing that it's, if here's, do we set a standard then, because this is so wishy-washy? If it's more than 2 feet or more than a certain percentage, that would have to come before Plan Commission for review?
If the city attorney says that's a reasonable path, and then it'll always be reviewable by ZBA if they didn't like the decision or whatever.
If they wanted to
you
appeal it.
Yeah.
And then, but we're still going to check out other communities and go down that route. Great, thank you. Thank you, Alder. Any other issues we should address? What sort of action are you looking for in this tonight, Sonia, or just feedback?
I would like a motion from the Plan Commission to make a recommendation to City Council based on what we reviewed in May and then these sections that came back. So this was just the general cleanup. In addition to the things tonight, the fees, the Zoning Board of Appeals section for non-conforming structures, I'd want to specify whether we were changing the word whenever to whether, or if we're just deleting that and referencing the other article, adding the section into land disturbance, and what we're doing with earth station dish antennas. And then the fourth one, what I heard was taking that to Public Works for review, and then additional research on the single-family standards.
What's the council taking this up?
I think the ultimate goal was to have most committees done before budget season. I think the Plan Commission, compared to other city commissions and committees, are ahead of the game or on par, so I think we're fine.
Chris?
Could we at least get something back from Public Works on the Monona Drive access guidelines and pass it as a whole thing to the council? Would that be all right?
And that doesn't need to go, that's not going to committee, that's just going to department head.
That's fine, however we do it. Unless, if he feels it needs to go to committee, fine. If he doesn't, then
So you'd like that information before acting on this? Is
it
that-
would be nice and then send it as a finished document. Otherwise, we're going to send that piece in. We're going to say, later we're going to talk about single-family homes that are excessive in some respects.
Since it's fresh in our mind, can I just kind of walk through some of the points we talked about tonight so that we don't have to try to remember next time? The only outstanding item might be what you're requesting. So if we look at was brought up tonight was that variance application fee of $350 versus $250 versus something else. What is the direction that folks are heading on that?
I'd be inclined to support keeping it at the 250 level.
Agreed.
Okay. I know we're not voting on it, but just trying to get a feel while it's fresh in our minds. Yes, sir.
I would ask that staff not necessarily log all the time, but to just look at the time tracking to see if that's reasonable or if it needs to be adjusted. Because we can adjust that at any time.
Okay.
Now you got two sparks concerned.
Kathy, ladies
I
first.
think that that's not reasonable unless she tracks the time for all the stuff she does, because I think that when something says 25 or $50, she's not spending I mean, it's costing a lot more for time than that, but we want to be business friendly. Well, we should be family friendly. I mean,
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
just,
And some of the stuff, it's not just the documents, but it's the time. I mean, when, like the applicant that came in tonight, they had an engineer, they had an architect, they had a sign company that prepared items for them, and there's a lot of hand-holding when you're dealing with a homeowner. There's a lot more time spent with the homeowner than, in some cases, than this. The other, yes, sir.
I agree with Kathy, because I think we are trying to attract people to Monona. There is not a thing we review that this permit fee covers your time, nothing. And we want businesses to come in and put on additions. We want people to come in with families, with putting up buildings, putting on building additions, et cetera. There's nothing here that would cover staff time for all the time you put in on it. No way. So if we're gonna log time on the ZBA permit, then we need to be logging on all, and that's just a waste of our time.
Talk to April. Jeez. Anyway.
Yeah.
Second item was the change in use from 350 to 125 was discussed tonight. And then what were the other quick items?
On fees?
Were there
Or-
fees or the other items that,
I think the rest of the fees were,
Yeah.
nothing was really discussed much further.
but what was the other, some of the
The
other?
next one was under non-conforming uses. It was either change the word, as Susan mentioned, from whenever to whether, or delete that whole reference and refer back to the other section of the code.
Is there a lean one way or the other?
Eliminate and refer.
Everybody okay with that? I don't hear any objections. Next one?
The next one was the land disturbance section, adding in the reference to our existing erosion control ordinance.
Is that the one we're getting? No, we're getting it for the streets, right?
Mhm.
Any comment?
Yeah, it's this section.
In addition, see memo. That's, yeah, it just refers to 216, right?
Mhm.
No, everybody's okay with that? I'm guessing. Anything else?
The last one was essentially a review of the entire 2 pages of Appendix B by the Public Works Director.
No, you missed the dishes.
What?
The dishes.
Dishes? Oh. Earth station dish antennas. I think the options were to leave it at 9 feet or to prohibit new ones over 2 feet in diameter.
I like that. Everybody else like that?
yep.
I'd just like to add a sentence, a variance may be requested from ZBA, something just so that they know that if there's a reason for it, they could request a variance, but then the neighbors get notice and they can all come in and weigh in on it.
And there's no, any existing or grandfathered in?
Correct, but just make it clear that a variance can be granted for them if there's a reason for
It's
it.
true of almost anything that we're doing, right?
I know, but I just don't know if there's a real reason for people to still have those, and if there is, I don't think we should have them, but I just don't know.
I think your phone can get more information than those 80s dishes did.
Probably.
Um,
Your phone.
anything else?
That's referring to both.
Appendix B to Public Works Director. And then the last one, I can start putting together some research on single-family
Mhm.
height and impervious surface.
Sounds good. Thank you. Okay, we're moving on. Thank you very much, Sonia, for all your help. And Sydney, appreciate it. New business? Any new business?
The next meetings are July 11th and 25th. I do not have a lot of people lined up for those. We're still expecting a new 105-foot communication tower out by Walmart and the sign code subcommittee to get together.
Have they met?
soon. Not yet.
Ah,
You're on it, you would know.
I will not be here, I'll be on vacation on the 25th.
Okay.
Yeah, I won't be here either.
oh, there's no point in having a meeting then.
I think we'll.
That's, there you go.
So,
Don't plan anything for the 25th.
no meeting July 25th.
Reports of staff and commission members, staff reporting regarding status of development projects. Nothing, we
new.
already did that. Plan commission request for information. Chris?
Question. A lot of our really nice landscape on Manoa Drive is struggling right now, and what is our plan, or what do we have in place to keep it replaced? Because that's what really makes it pop.
Public Works, I believe, has a tree replacement plan, so I can double check on that again, Public Works Director. Are you referring specifically to like the dead trees over by Femrite?
And there's some down, I think it's getting closer to the high school, but there's some areas that they, it's been enough years now, the ones that are gonna make it and not. And the thing I'm worried about is part of what made Manoa Drive really pop was the intensity of landscaping, not just the landscaping, but the intensity of it. So to go back and replace it, oh, we have too many trees here, we normally plant them this far apart. Well, what made it special and what you feel when you drive down there is the intensity of the spacing. That was a tighter spacing. So I just don't want us to have a tree replacement policy and somebody comes in, oh, we usually plant these 40 feet on center, so let's leave them 40 feet on center and pop the middle one out.
And in the enforcement, I mean, that whole concept was to have a living wall rather than a brick wall. And some of those,
That's the bushes and the
I
shrubs
understand
and
that,
those stuff,
but
yes.
some of
yes.
those are dying, not
Yep.
being replaced, they're weeds.
Yep.
And to me, if they're not gonna take care of them, then it's gonna move towards a bid district and the city will do it on their nickel. But I don't know, to be determined. Anything else? Any other requests? If not, we're on to number 8. Sue? Oh, I was just gonna say, the rookie always has to make that. All right, there you go. All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, everyone.
Susan, don't go till I talk to you, so.
Oh, I'm first. So,
Thanks, everybody.
I'll give him a call. And then I'll soften him up for you. Because I can talk to him and tell him what I think he should be doing, and then I'll find out from him